So this morning we're going to get into functional testing. It's going to be a joint effort between Lois and Lauren. Sorry, I should have introduced, just because there is a lot of new faces. Lois McNary over here, she is the VP of Sport for Special Olympics. So she oversees us. And then Lauren Van Oosten. Lauren, where are you? Are you in the room? I don't see her in the room. She's going to be doing the exercises in this session. Lauren is our new performance person, so she's kind of looking after functional testing and some of the different training gaps and stuff that are coming up. So she's about a month on the job, I guess. She got hired at the end of September, so we kind of threw her into everything.
And then you went on holiday.
And then I went on holidays, that's right. I didn't get a holiday in the summer, so I gotta go when I can.
And she handled it fine?
She did. She did fabulous. So anyways, functional testing, Lois McNary.
I'm not doing the exercise part because I couldn't, but I'm going to do this first part because Lauren wasn't here when we started the functional testing, and for her to present all the results from something that she wasn't a part of would be really difficult for her. So we talked a lot yesterday about benchmarks and knowing where your athletes start from and that type of thing, and we felt it was really, really important in this process to have data on where we started, and of course that's part of the Allinger Consulting program. They said, you know, we need to be able to see where are the athletes even at before we can move that forward. So we started putting together functional testing, and so for the swim and track athletes leading into provincial games, they did some functional testing, and we had to refine the tests, we had to refine how we did it. We had to refine a lot of different things about the functional testing. So that we could feel comfortable with the tests that we had. So we now have data, good data, from 3 separate functional tests that were done over a 1-year period. And what happened was Special Olympics BC went into your regions and set up functional testing days where we had the tests done by trained examiners. So we used kinesiology students, people from Pacific Sport, different universities, etc., because it was really, really important to us that the data that we got was 100% true data. So in the past, athletes would get to what we call the failure rate. So when you're doing a push-up, you have to do a proper push-up, and at some point when you stop doing it correctly, that's your failure point. But coaches, when they were administering the test, would let the athletes go until they stopped, not until they got to the point where they weren't doing it properly. So that doesn't give you true data. So by having these individuals come in and do the testing, they made sure that when an athlete was doing a wall sit and started to kind of sit on the floor, that was not true data, and they would stop the test. The other thing that we found was the coaches became really, really valuable in this testing as the motivator. Because I know this will be surprising to you, but there are some of our athletes that will stop just because they don't want to do it anymore, not because they can't. Yeah, shocking. Not because they can't go longer. And so the coaches were there to motivate the athlete and to say, especially in stuff like the plank, that, you know, that go, and keeping the athlete motivated to go until they really couldn't go anymore, not just until they thought, okay, I've done this long enough and it's kind of boring. So that was a really, really important part of the functional testing, and so it allowed our coaches to do that and not have to worry about the count or the whatever. We had the trained examiners doing that, so that was really great. The other piece that we were provided by Allinger Consulting was that we really needed to do something about it after we did the test. Just giving coaches the results and saying, here's where your athlete sits in these 11 tests that we had developed wasn't good enough. So we prepared what corrective exercises. And some athletes might get 23 corrective exercises, and some athletes might get 5. So athletes received corrective exercises for the areas within the functional testing that they really needed to improve on. So that was really important. And each test, we tried to mix up the corrective exercises and come up with new exercises, more exercises. One of the things that Lauren's now tasked with is going away and looking at all those corrective exercises and finding even more, because again, we're gonna start doing functional testing in your regions again. We want the same athletes plus more to come out, but we need to give them different exercises to change it up, to vary it, that kind of thing. So Lauren's gonna be doing that. So after the functional testing, what happened was the results were put into Dropbox so that coaches, family members, athletes could go in and they could access that data. Where we fell down was that we felt like once we put that in there, everybody would just know to go there. And in talking with Carrie, people would say, oh, you know, we got the first data and then nobody put any more data in. Data went in, but we didn't invite you every single time to go look at the data. So if you, as Dropboxes are set up for your sport, as that type of thing happens, we're putting new videos, new information in there all the time. And so you really should go in once you're invited and check, like even once a month, just check what's in there, because new information is going in there. And so after the first functional testing kind of week in the province, I guess 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever Lauren sets up, but after that first, we will be uploading that data into sport-specific Dropboxes for you to be able to go in and access that information. And I think it's really important that you do that, because that's then going to tell you where your athletes are at, and all the corrective exercises will be there. But you should encourage the athletes to bring you the corrective exercises they were given, so that you can start to input that into your everyday program. Because if you see that 10 of your athletes have balance issues, it stands to reason that in your warm-up, in some part of your program, you should be doing something that works on balance, because that's what's going to make them better. Does that make sense to everybody? Good. Okay. So we will be hosting this year only 2, because apparently, because Lauren started late, she wasn't able to do one 2 weeks into her employment with us. So we've given her a break, and she's going to do the first one in January, and then we'll do another one in May or June, and so that you'll have data for your athletes this year to sort of say this is where you're at. But it'll also allow us, with all of the athletes from summer games, some of the winter games athletes who've been tested, and just random athletes who wanted to come out for testing, it'll allow us to continue to see if they are developing and how they're growing. So we've done functional testing on over 500 athletes in the province. And what's going to happen with the functional testing is that when Lauren puts out the date, if you want your athletes will be directly invited if they were part of the program before. But if you also want other athletes to be invited to come, they're welcome. We just need to know. Because obviously if we think we're going to get 50 athletes to go through functional testing and set up 3 hours, and all of a sudden we get 100, that's not going, we're not going to be able to do that. So just, if you have other athletes that you want to include on the day that you hear it is in your region, let Lauren know, and she will then expand our ability to have those testers there and make sure that all the athletes get through. Okay? So here's what we know from the results, of our functional testing. That it's hard to see there, but 66% of all athletes lost weight. And if you start to look at sort of across the board the sports, and you have these slides in your package.
No,
so,
they don't.
Oh, you don't?
I'm sorry.
Okay. We'll get them to you. If you start to look at that, you can see that certain sports had more weight loss than others. But the piece that you really need to see here is that we had a number of young athletes that were in our program that shouldn't be losing weight. They needed to be gaining weight and muscle, and they did. But they'll fall into that 34% because when you do the data, of course, they gained weight. But that was one of the pieces that we really had to look at. We had to make sure that we weren't always talking about weight loss. It was about healthy eating, how we get the athletes healthier, and we had to be really individual, because we also had some rhythmic girls that definitely shouldn't have been losing weight. And we had other athletes on the team that we didn't want them to lose weight. We needed them to maintain, but not lose. We needed others to gain. And then we had significant amounts of athletes that needed to lose weight. And I think our highest weight loss in any one athlete was 30 pounds. And it was an athlete that was really self-dedicated to that, and who changed their whole family's way of looking at healthy eating, because they were really, really dedicated to making sure that happened. So it was really important to us to state that we're thrilled with what happened, but we are cognizant of the fact that not every athlete needs to lose weight. So then we look at the ball toss, and of our athletes, 85% of our athletes improved in the ball toss. And if you look at softball, 94%, so that's kind of important to them. But I find it interesting, 5-pin bowling was 100% of the athletes improved. It stands to reason that our 5-pin bowlers are often our least healthy athletes, and so they have the greatest room for improvement, so it makes sense that they would show the greatest improvement. So we didn't really worry about what the numbers looked like by sport. We looked at individual athletes and how they fared. So athletes who fell within that 15% would have received a number of corrective exercises that coaches could work on with them so that they could improve their performance. Then in the wall sit, if anybody's ever done a wall sit, you know that it's really not the easiest thing to do. So we had 80% of our athletes improved in the wall sit, and that was a proper wall sit. Again, we didn't allow them to be, so that their butt was higher than their knees and all of that kind of stuff. They really had to be doing a proper wall sit. And we were pretty excited that we had a really, really high percentage across the board of athletes who were able to do that and improve their performance. So in jumps, we had 77% of the athletes, 94% improvement again in the 5-pin bowlers. So that was exciting for us that they were able to do that. We have a jump pad that actually measures what the height that the athletes jump. So it isn't even that we're kind of trying to see how high they jump. It physically measures how high the athletes can jump. One of the things we saw in this one was, this is really one of the ones where coaches had to be there to motivate the athletes. The way that you jump on the jump pad is very specific, and so we had athletes that would jump, but they just kind of jumped. So it was great to have coaches there that knew the athlete. We have one swimmer in particular who is not very verbal, and the volunteers trying to get him to jump to his full capability was really tough. But when the coach came over and knew the types of things that motivated him and said, you have to jump like Superman jumps, he was able to do that, and his results were double what he'd done the first jump because they knew how to motivate him to understand what the expectation was. And so I think that's a really important piece as well, that if we want true data, we need you as coaches there to help us so that you know how to motivate that athlete, or how to speak to that athlete in a language they understand and get them to do the skill the way we need it to be done. So that was an important piece for that one. On balance, not as good as some of the other tests, which is fine, but we really are going to look at our corrective exercises for balance. But if you'll see the rhythmic gymnastics team, 100% improvement on balance. That was one of the main focal pieces of rhythmic gymnastics, is your balance and all of how beautiful you look and can stand on. I don't know what they do with those rhythmic gymnastics girls, but lots of stuff. And so they were working on it constantly. It was a huge part of what they did over and above the corrective exercises. And so they were super successful, 100% improvement, which translated directly into their sport for sure, into their performance. So the next one is our push-ups, and I don't have my glasses on, but I think 85% improvement in our push-ups. And again, the same thing with the athletes. It was really ensuring that they did a proper push-up as we moved through the process. Thanks. In the plank, we had 86% improvement in our athletes. When you look across the board, a lot of hundreds, like a lot of improvement in the plank. That's a really tough thing, but we have an athlete that can do a 7-minute plank. So is there anybody who would like to go up against him in the plank? So he was able to do a 7-minute plank while he talked to the athlete next to him the whole time, encouraging that athlete to keep going. Any takers? We'll bring them in. Yeah. But we had a lot of our athletes that really started to improve that core, and that was so important to all sport is that improvement in core. So it was really exciting for us that we saw a high number here. So here in the speed, it's interesting that in speed and then in agility, which I'll show you next, we really didn't show a very strong improvement. Certainly there was improvement. So we're going to evaluate the corrective exercises for sprint and agility and see if perhaps we didn't have the right exercises, if there were other things we could do to motivate, but 51% of the athletes improved, and that's good, but again, probably clearly not as good as all the other areas. So it's something that we need to look at. And maybe what we need to look at, 42% their agility, but maybe what we need to look at is, again, perhaps they started so low that even that much improvement was significant. We don't know, and that's what we have to look at in those two things. So those are the 11 areas that we check when we're doing functional testing. We're going to continue to look at those areas. We're going to continue to provide corrective exercises to the athletes. And we encourage you to bring out any athlete that you feel would benefit from this type of testing to be involved in the days, because it is a great way for you as coaches to get a benchmark on the athlete's physical literacy and really be able to then look at what's the program I need to make sure that athlete can move through sport and through life. And a lot of this transitions to life. We do have an athlete who was a swim athlete, very young, coming into our program, about 13, and when he first came into the program, and he was 13 years old when he came in, I think, 13, 14. Anyway, one of the things we found was that his agility was really very weak. And the person testing said, we have to really work on that, because for such a young person growing so quickly, that's going to be a huge piece for them in their life. And we need to make sure we're really working on agility and flexibility for that individual, because otherwise, as they get older, they're going to have more and more problems, period, not just in sport. But that's really valuable for athletes and for individuals to know, because again, if we say that we're building the full athlete here, then that's an important piece that we have to look at. So take the opportunity to get your coaches involved or your athletes involved in this, because I think it really will give you that benchmark that you need to be able to move your athletes forward. So we're going to take a break while we set up, and then Lauren's going to come up and she's going to show you some of those corrective exercises so that when you go back, you feel really comfortable that you can take those and show them to your athletes, because that's an important piece too. If you just get something on paper and you're not comfortable delivering it, then you just don't do it. Whereas if you have the ability to see it, it'll all be videoed, and you can go back then, and as you get athletes that we say, oh, they should be doing this corrective exercise or that corrective exercise, you're going to be able to see Lauren doing it, and that'll allow you to, I feel, better prepare the athlete and take them through that. So we're going to take a real quick break while they set up a different camera, and then Lauren's going to come forward and show you that kind of stuff. Okay?